Okay, we're back. Chapter 29. As you can see, I'm in a different room. Hopefully this will make it a little easier for you to see when we're reading new chapters. Okay, here goes. The compass was flying swiftly through an endless wind-blown desert of red sand. The vast, lonely expanse was visible through the curved glass of the ship, which stretched the entire length of the large cabin. Badger, seated in the cracked leather captain's chair, had his two hands firmly on the jet pilot-style steering wheel. He eased the wheel with utmost precision, leaning the craft slightly as he slid between the rose-colored outcroppings, thin as columns that rose suddenly from the desert floor. As the columns sprouted up, they take form of horned demons and fallen angels, eyes flashing first in surprise and then in hatred before dissolving again into the sand. "Wouldn't it be easier to fly over them?" George asked. "The higher you go, the higher they rise, and the more alive they become," Badger explained. "This height is perfect," George squeaked. Pinch sat in the co-pilot seat beside Badger, checking gauges and dials and slapping buttons with her powerful paws. The interior of the cabin was filled with dark wood, brass valves, and leaded glass dials that housed shivering needles. There were endless rows of switches and blinking lights of red and green. It had the feel of an early submarine or a plane from long ago. "This ship rules," George whispered to Speedy, who was too full of wonder to speak. Like many children their age, they loved ships and planes and spacecraft, things of wonder that combined nimble speed, brute power, and intricate technology. This was a special place, not just a transportation device, but also a well-loved and trusted ship, burnished by battle, a warrior that had seen it all, that had been piloted by many and had saved even more. The compass had been a home on long missions, and it showed. In fact, it looked like an antique store where every object had a story, some triumphant, some hilarious, and some too terribly sad to speak of. Faded stickers, tin action figures, old color photos of beautiful men and women were all jammed here and there along the dashboard. Bits of silver Christmas tinsel were strung above the window. A long rectangular black and white photo of a group of stern-looking men and women in old-fashioned clothes was drilled above a small green radar screen. A brass label on the frame of the photo said, "Fearless Travelers, First Class." The year was too faded to make out. Everywhere they looked, there was something old and interesting. There were glossy postcards of places travelers wished to go or had visited during time off, tiny hand-carved jade statues of long-lost dreamers, baseball cards from teams that were no longer in existence, an intricately woven chewing gum chain, and on either side of the dash, as if watching over all, sat a blue sock monkey and a yellow stuffed duck. Each was very much alive. "Who are these guys?" George asked. "Duck's name is Uh-oh." "Monkey is Toots," Badger yawned. "Engine 6 is losing power," Pinch said gravely. Badger stood and turned to George. "Take the wheel." "What?" "Take the wheel. I need to check on the jam in the engine, and I'm taking your brother with me." "Don't I need some kind of driver's license?" George asked. "It's simple. Any idiot can do it." "I know you can," George said, "but we're talking about me." "Go," Badger snarled, and George scurried into the captain's seat. "Just hold on with two hands. Keep it steady. We're out of the time sands now, so all have to do is keep it straight." "Good luck, George," Speedy said, giving a pat on the shoulder, which made George jerk the wheel and sent the entire ship tilting wildly to the left. "Ooh, sorry," George apologized and righted the ship. It was easier than he'd expected, and this instantly made him feel better. He let out a quick sigh. "Go on, I got this," he said with growing confidence. "Let me know when you get a reading on Nell," Badger instructed Pinch. The Panther nodded and continued to work a set of dials on a green radar screen where a single line swept round and round, searching. Badger led Speedy through the network of catwalks and corridors of a dark metal and glowing amber-colored lights. Speedy walked lost in his thoughts of Nell. "She sings," he said. "Who?" Badger said, confused by the large boy's sudden declaration. "Nell," Speedy said thoughtfully. She tells everyone she can't sing, and she never does. Not when anyone's watching, anyway. When she has to sing at school, she doesn't even move her lips. Most people singing in a group are faking it, Badger agreed. Unless you have one of those voices that make people stop and listen, Badger said, as though he met a few who possess that gift. Wondering where this is going. Singing. Something about Nell singing. This is a twist. We haven't heard about Nell singing before. So I'm wondering what that's got to do with this. They're looking for her. Are they going to hear her singing? Thing is, Nell is that girl, and no one knows it. Speedy paused. Except for me. He smiled with a secret. Her room is right next to mine, and every night her alarm goes off at 3:30. I can hear her get out of bed, walk across the room to the window, and then she begins to sing, softly, all sorts of songs. She sings until 3:45, and then walks back to her bed and goes back to sleep. Badger stopped. Nell? He said, smiling. Speedy nodded. But don't tell her, she'll kill me. You have my word, he promised and asked, is she any good? She's awesome, Speedy said, thrilled to be sharing his only secret with someone. I used to imagine I had a magic singing bird living in the next room. No sooner had the word bird left his lips than he was reminded of Nell and his mother and the danger they were in, and Badger understood. He put his hand on the boy's shoulder and explained how they would find Nell in the vast region of the wicked places. The only way she could have escaped to Nevermore Hall is by the elevator, he said. The elevator dreamer is a tricky one. She opens doors and rearranges realities. Sometimes she will bring you exactly where you want, and sometimes she will bring you to the place you fear most. Oh, so remember, that's what happened. She accidentally got on the elevator. Turns out it might be a good thing. Now she has to find her way out. That's not nice. Badger stopped. He turned and studied Speedy to see if he was making a joke. Speedy's kind brown eyes were unflinching. He was not. What makes you think that people should be nice? He asked. I don't know, Speedy said thoughtfully. I never really thought about it. I just think it's natural. Badger looked at Speedy and laughed. A large, loud, hearty laugh. It isn't? Speedy asked. Of course it is, but we're not talking about people. She isn't nice, and she isn't mean. She's a dreamer. She sees things we cannot. She could have dropped Nell in Vazenkrak, but it's more likely she didn't. She doesn't want to take anyone's side on this, but every umbrella is equipped with a homing device. A homing device to get Nell home. As long as Nell still has it. Remember, we left off with her wanting or thinking about trading it for Rose back from that gross clown. As long as Nell still has it, once we get a reading on where she is, we'll set course and be with her in no time. This gave Speedy a great sense of relief. He hadn't stopped worrying about Nell and Rose since he saw his sister disappear into Nevermore Hall. As they neared the engine room, the hum and roar of the mechanisms grew louder. At the end of the corridor was a heavy steel door with a round window in the center that was fogged with steam. The engine room is in a dangerous place, understand? It is loud, so stay close and try not to get bitten, Badger warned. Bitten? Badger yanked the lever, pushing open the door. A thick wall of warm steam flooded over them. For a moment, Speedy was lost in a cloud of whiteness. Badger grabbed his hand and pulled him forward. Speedy could see nothing, but he knew they were not alone, because all around him was a huff of breath, the roar of an engine chugging, and the occasional whining of a horse. Hold on! Badger screamed across the din and hit a lever that activated a fan. There was a whirl, and when the steam cleared, Speedy got his first look at the engine that powered the compass. Standing in the line before him, in stalls separated by bands of neon blue light, were 8 enormous horses that appeared to be part animal, part machine. The front part of the animals, their heads, necks, and chests, were horses, very real and very alive, but their bottoms and back halves were motorcycles, on wheels in the front, one wheel in the front, two in the back. The creatures were beautiful, their coats made of brilliant, gleaming liquid chrome that pulsed with life, and their eyes a fierce chestnut color. The horses' gazes were wise and truly wild. They were animals, not robots, creatures that hadn't been built, but born. This is the Dreamland's only 8 silverback power engine, explained Badger. The wheels of the creature spun in a uniform hum over a rectangle of flowing blue light. We read about blue light a lot. I'm wondering about that. Is that a symbol for something? What could blue light symbolize? Speedy gazed into the light, and a demon's face slid by. He jumped up. The silverbacks run on nightmares, Badger explained, but they're trapped in the tank, so don't worry. One of the horses, engine number 6, was jammed up. The creature's back tires were straining but not spinning. Badger walked into the thin catwalk beside the struggling creature. Kneeling down, he studied the back wheel and immediately determined the problem. Here, Badger grunted to Speedy, stand in front of her head, and when I give you the signal, lay your hands across her eyes. You want me to touch her? Speedy said, peeping nervously at the massive silver beast. Even glancing at her caused her to snap and show a mouthful of sharp silver teeth. It's the only way we can keep her calm while I regroove her. You must do it quickly. Look, I'm called Speedy because I'm not quick. It's a joke, see? I only move fast at weird times when I'm not thinking about it, he said. Then he quickly added, or if I have to use the bathroom. Perfect, don't think. You say that a lot, you know. It's good advice in almost every situation. Just, okay, but, Speedy said, trying to think up another reason he couldn't help. But one thing he definitely wasn't speedy with was coming up with excuses. No buts, Badger yelled. Do it quick. Hands over her eyes. Once they're covered, she'll become gentle as a lamb. Speedy took a few steps until he was standing right before the creature. It snarled and snapped, hot steam snorting from its muzzle. She's going to bite my face off, he said. On 3, Badger said. 1, 2, 3. As quickly as he could, Speedy snapped his hands over the silverback's eyes. Instantly, the creature grew calm. The energy flowing through her was intense and set a shivering vibration through Speedy's entire body. As he held her head, Speedy saw something in his mind's eye coming into focus out of the whispering haze, and suddenly he found himself before a ragged-looking man in a long overcoat and black boots. His greasy, matted hair was bright orange, and his face was painted pale white with a blue slash across his lips and red drips like splatters of blood along his cheeks. A clown. Not just any clown, but a dark nightmare of a clown. And standing before the clown was Nell. They were fighting a duel in the dark forest. A skeleton stood by, watching. So we've got a twist here. We've got a change in what's going on in the book. So now Nell and Badger and Speedy and George are coming together. That's my guess. We are getting towards the end of the book, so I'm thinking about how do stories go. Stories go that when we start to get to the end of the book, we come to a climax, even though we know it's been like a roller coaster, right? Up and down, up and down. So let's stay tuned that we might be coming to a climax that involves all of them coming back together. That's my guess. I'm predicting here. Let's go. Let her go, Badger said. Speedy removed his hands from the silver creature's head, and the vision vanished. His eyes were wide, his face blank with terror. She's back on groove, Badger said, nodding to the silverback. I saw Nell, Speedy said. Where? She was in a forest, and she was fighting a clown, Speedy said with a shrug, and even faked a little laugh, hoping that it was a strange imaginary vision, some side effect of touching the silverback that Badger would explain with an annoyed frown. Clown? Badger asked carefully, as though the word was a bottle filled with acid he didn't want to drop. Speedy knew then that what he had seen was absolutely real. Go on. It was in a forest. Skeletons were watching. I heard the word Despario. Despario Forest. That's north of Boneville. It is a hideout for clowns. Badger turned and began hurrying back up toward the bridge. Engine 6 is back online, Badger said as they entered. He glanced out the windshield. The desert outside had been replaced by a dark landscape of a ruined city. A swarm of cow-sized bats swooped past the window, flapping their leather wings. I think I made a wrong turn, George said. Sorry. As they jerked the wheel to avoid a charging bat and flew through the window of a crumbling skyscraper. There was a screeching, scraping crush as the eagle head of the ship's western prow hit the side of the wall and burst out again through another wall, which fell away like paper. The sky was a cold blue-black and shimmered with stars. The compass flew on into the night. You did fine, Badger said, grabbing the wheel and nodding for him to get up. They quickly switched places. Nell is in Despario Forest, he said as he guided the ship upward through the clouds. Clowns? Pinch asked, her eyes narrowing. Looks that way. We got a cloud of something coming toward us, Pinch said. A long, bone-chilling moan rattled the ship, sending a stab of cold through the cabin. What was that? George said nervously. No, don't tell me, because whenever I ask, it's something messed up. Spiders, Badger answered. I said don't tell me. All eyes were now fixed on the windshield. Streaking across the sky were what were looked at first. Let me start again. Streaking across the sky were what looked at first, like black-tipped missiles shooting out dark smoke. Hundreds, maybe thousands of spiders, the size of cars, were headed straight for them. The first spider rocketed past. It was enormous, with a massive head the color of tar. Its spindly legs worked furiously, moving like knitting needles as they rapidly pumped out an endless curtain of smoke-colored silk that unfurled wildly into the night air. There was something caught inside the dark silt. Don't look, Pinch cautioned, but it was too late and impossible to turn away from the horrible sight of it. On the other side of the black curtain were sleepers, thousands upon thousands of them, caught in spiders' webs, tumbling helplessly over each other. What are they? Speeder murmured, his lips quivering. The spiders of the waste, Badger whispered. Finding his voice, he continued. They inhabit the wastelands at the edge of Vazenkrak and have never left before, but they're fleeing now. They're fleeing and taking their slaves with them. Why? Well, there is one possible explanation, but I thought I'd never live to see it. What? Speedy asked nervously. The red egg, Badger said. They sense it is about to break. Time is running out. Badger pushed a few buttons that made the ship rumble. We must reach Nell before they do too. Full speed ahead. Do you remember about the red egg? I'll be honest and say I'm not remembering the red egg. In the comments, write if you remember, okay? Help us out. Every metal surface conducted the explosive sounds of the engines, and the rattles and thumps shut down the cooling system. The bridge was now 100 degrees, as blasting waves of heat and a constant thunderous rumble poured through the vents. The bleat of the alarm filled the air. Dark Daughters! Badger screamed above the wailing siren. George, take the blasters on the whale prow. Speedy, take the eagle prow. Don't fire until you get a signal. Speedy suddenly realized the implications of the command. Awesome. Pinch let the boys down a thin iron staircase through a narrow vibrating corridor to a chrome door on which someone had long ago painted a skull and crossbones. The door opened, revealing the cockpit. They crossed the threshold and were inside the large silver whale-shaped prow that jutted out from the western side of the ship. The small space had a leather chair, a two-handheld blaster, and a small round window that looked out across the immense sky. Out of the bank of purple clouds flew hundreds. Out of the purple clouds flew hundreds of dark daughters. Racing towards them on the backs of flying octopuses. There's a visual. The sight made things suddenly very real. Get in your chair. Strap yourself in, Pinch said. You didn't say please, George said, trying to hide the fear in his voice. Pinch growled in response and raised her paw, pointing to a tall tube light. That light will start to glow blue. When it turns red, fire. But do not even think of firing before it's ready, even if you're taking heat. Taking heat? Being attacked. Which is no big deal because the glass is totally blast-proof, Speedy added, tapping the round bubble window that separated them from the sky. Not exactly, Pinch warned. But it's going to be okay, Speedy said. We're not going to leave you here to be shot at. That's exactly what we are going to do, Pinch said. And we are taking you to the Eagle Prow to be shot at. And it's going to be okay? Speedy repeated. Dark Daughters are not really fighters, right? The idea of shooting a blaster had seemed fun to him before he realized that people would be shooting back. I don't think so, Pinch said, matter-of-factly. Dark Daughters are fearsome warriors, crack shots, and will fight until their enemies are dead. Oh, that stinks. Indeed. But that is the situation, Pinch said directly, her gaze steady as a steel bridge across a river. In the dreamlands, everything happens for a reason that you'll never understand. Things change, reality shifts. You don't have time to ask why. Why is this happening? Why am I here? How did it all come to this? All you know is you are here and your moment to live has arrived. And now our moment is a fight we might not win. That is the situation. We are overmatched and outnumbered. That we can't control, but we can control our fear. How? By turning it around and using it. That's not helping, Speedy said quietly. It will when the arrows begin to fly. What if it doesn't? If it doesn't, you won't survive. Now, Speedy, follow me. Speedy gave his brother a pat on the shoulder and followed Pinch to the opposite side of the ship where the Eagle Prow awaited. He followed her through the steel door and found an identical room. He strapped in silently. There was nothing left to say. He was going into battle, and blood would be spilled. Pinch pointed out the gun and the gauges, and Speedy nodded as though he was listening, but he wasn't. His big, kind eyes were fixed on the tide of the Dark Daughters that was coming to kill him. The octopuses flew in one long line, their tentacles undulating smoothly in the wind. Pinch slapped the telescope, welded to the top of the gun, and motioned for Speedy to look inside. Speedy put his eye to the cold brass. On the back of each octopus was a leather saddle, in which a single Dark Daughter rode. The women wore long, flowing robes, tall boots, and necklaces of black flowers. Their faces were not visible. Each wore masks of burnished silver, shaped like an animal head. Hounds, snakes, hyenas. Strapped to each Dark Daughter's back were her weapons, longbows with quivers filled with flaming arrows. Well, isn't that a sight? Find your weapon! Speedy removed his eye from the telescope and wrapped his fingers around the handles of the old blaster. The first flaming arrow shot past the window, falling far short. Just a warning shot. The battle was coming. You can't kill a Dark Daughter, Pinch instructed. But with a good shot, you can stun them and knock them out of battle. Remember the blue light. Wait until we are at full power. Pinch snarled and darted out the door to return to the bridge. The door slammed and the small cockpit was silent, except for the wind rushing against the glass. The thin pane was all that separated Speedy from the Dark Daughters. He peered into the sky. They were coming closer. a tidal wave of masked warriors growing even larger. A few flaming arrows sizzled past the ship. They were too distant to hit the compass just yet, but that would end any second. Speedy felt his heart pounding ferociously. The blue light grew brighter, the small tube filling up like a thermometer rising. "Get ready to fire!" Badger's voice crackled over the loud speaker. Speedy felt calm now. He tightened his grip on the blaster's handles. On the top of each was a red button for his thumbs. All he had to do was aim, point, and press. He put his eye to the scope. A single fighter in a hound-shaped helmet now led the vast line of Dark Daughters. She held a glowing sword above her head. Behind her, the line moved in military precision, their bows drawn and ready to fire their flaming arrows on her command. "Ready!" Badger said over the speaker. The leader brought down her sword, and the army let loose their arrows. Even from inside the cabin, across the distance of the sky, Speedy could hear the unison ping of the bows released and the whoosh of thousands of flaming arrows as they flew straight for the compass. "Fire!" Badger shouted. Speedy's thumbs passed down rapidly on the buttons of his gun, and there was a roar. A screaming flash of neon red exploded across the sky to meet the arrows head on. Some were taken out, but many were unharmed. Speedy watched in terror as a hail of flaming arrows came toward the glass. Suddenly, the ship dipped hard, dodging the assault. Badger was a skilled pilot. He dipped and rolled the craft, sliding through the assaults, and then he swung back around. He again gave the command to fire. Speedy shot, hitting a large Dark Daughter in the wolf's helmet. Suddenly, her octopus plummeted downwards. The attack intensified. Arrows pelted the ship like rain. Some smashed against the windows, sending shivering cracks across the panes. Speedy held his finger steady on the gun. Blasts fired repeatedly from his gun and others. He tried not to think about George as arrows smashed into the ship. There was the sound of explosions and metal singed and tearing. "Fight," Speedy thought. "Fight and don't think." He blasted away, turning the gun to follow a Dark Daughter racing past. The sky was ablaze with smoke and screams and glowing blasts of light. All the while the ship zoomed in and out of the cloud of flying fighters. For a moment the sky was clear. Then a tall Dark Daughter wearing a golden helmet shaped like a shark's head flew out of the cloud and headed straight for Speedy. She moved quickly, and before he could react, she had landed her octopus on top of the eagle prow. With a murderous calm, she walked toward the bubbled glass of the gunner's cockpit. Speedy's heart beat wildly. The barrel of his gun shot out, but not directly up. He could not reach her. She stood over him, staring into the bubble of glass, silent and still. Without taking her eyes off him, she removed a flaming arrow from her quiver and placed it in her bow. She slowly drew back on the string and aimed straight for Speedy's heart. "No!" Speedy tried to undo his seatbelt and escape, but it was locked. He was trapped. The Dark Daughter watched him, struggle for a moment, and then nodded as if to say, "It's over." She released the arrow with a vicious ping. A loud explosion violently rocked the ship. The arrow shattered the glass beside Speedy's face and sank into his seat right beside his neck. He glanced up at the Dark Daughter. Calmly, she pulled out another arrow, fixed it in place, and drew back her bowstring. "Don't," he said. "Please, miss." The Dark Daughter smiled slightly and shook her head. "Too bad. Too late. Your dream has come to an end," she said almost sweetly, but her eyes weren't sweet. They were dark with murder. Mercy would not be shown today or ever. It was time to die. Speedy closed his eyes in fright when suddenly the ship plunged, diving straight down. The Dark Daughter lost her balance. Her feet slipped and she pitched over the side of the prow into the sky below. Speedy leaned over and gazed into the telescope. The Dark Daughters were retreating Yes, he shouted. Yes. He was ecstatic. They had done it. Stand down, Badger commanded. We got them on the run. Let them go. We need to save power. Lock your weapons and return to the bridge. And that's the end of chapter 20. Chapter 30 is coming up. And we're getting to the end of the book. All right, you guys. See you later.